You've had this moment recently. You had enough time to start, but you didn't. Not because you were overwhelmed, because you were waiting for the right feeling. You told yourself you'd begin once you had a little momentum, once your mind was clearer, once you handled a few small things first. So you did the small things. You checked something. You responded to something. You adjusted something. And suddenly, the window closed. Nothing went wrong technically. That's what makes it hard to notice. You weren't reckless. You weren't careless. You were just frictionless. Everything around you was easy to access and easy to keep doing. The next scroll, the next video, the next message, the next thought, the next, I'll do it in a second. No resistance, no barrier, no moment that forces you to decide. And the uncomfortable part is that you've learned how to stay in motion without moving forward. You can spend an hour getting ready to do the thing that would actually change something. You can do a full day of activity and still avoid the one action that would make you proud at night. Here's the second example that hits closer. You've probably tried to fix this by promising yourself more discipline. Tomorrow I'm locking in. Tomorrow I'm focused. But tomorrow arrives and your environment is still designed for you to drift. The easiest path still wins because nothing is pushing you toward the harder direction. That's the mirror. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels like normal life until you look up and realize you've been consistent at the wrong thing. This doesn't signal that you lack discipline. It signals something more specific. Your life is structured to remove friction from distraction and add friction to progress. And when that happens, your identity starts adapting to the path of least resistance, not in a dramatic way. Quietly. When the easiest options are always within reach, you don't need a strong reason to choose them. You just need a weak moment, a little tired, a little uncertain, a little bored. And the frictionless option becomes the default, not because you prefer it, but because your system has been trained to accept it. That's information, not judgment. It means your priorities might be real, but they're not protected. Your intentions are sincere, but they're not reinforced. And over time, the gap between what you say matters and what you actually make inevitable starts to shape how you see yourself. That's identity drift. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who follows through, and you start thinking of yourself as someone who tries, someone who has goals, but also has reasons, someone who wants change, but needs the mood to be right. It's subtle, but it changes your internal posture. And when your posture changes, everything changes. You don't fail because you don't care. You stall because your life keeps giving your distractions a straight path while your growth requires effort just to get started. It feels normal because the world you live in has normalized frictionless escape. Your phone is engineered to reduce resistance to consumption. One tap, instant stimulation. Your apps are designed to keep you inside them. Your notifications create urgency without importance. And your brain, doing what brains do, chooses the cheapest form of relief available. So yes, this is common. Almost everyone deals with it. But common doesn't mean harmless. Common just means the cost is widely distributed. The real problem is that frictionless living makes you feel like you're choosing when you're mostly being guided. You don't wake up deciding to lose an hour. You wake up without a barrier between you and the thing that steals your attention. Your day begins with exposure, and exposure becomes direction. Add this cultural factor. We've turned convenience into a value that outranks craftsmanship. Fast food, fast content, fast answers, fast dopamine. We're surrounded by systems that reward speed and reduce patience. So when something requires slowness, repetition, boredom, and sustained effort, your nervous system interprets it as unnecessary pain. And because the drift is subtle, it doesn't set off alarms. You still get through the day. You still do things. But the kind of effort that creates a different life, deep focus, delayed reward, structured discomfort, starts to feel foreign. This is why the trap persists. It doesn't look like sabotage. It looks like normal behavior in a world designed to keep you comfortable and distracted at the same time. Every day you're trading something, even when you're not conscious of it. When you choose the frictionless option, you're trading your future capacity for your current comfort. You're trading depth for ease. You're trading the identity of someone who follows through for the identity of someone who intends to. And the biggest cost isn't time, it's credibility with yourself. Because each time you say, I'll do it later, and later doesn't happen, a small part of you stops believing you. Not dramatically, just enough that your next promise carries less weight. Your standards soften, your urgency dulls. Your goals start to feel like wishes instead of commitments. Now stretch that trade forward 3 to 5 years, not in a catastrophic way, in a quiet, realistic way. Same ambitions, same awareness, same potential, but less trust, less sharpness, less confidence that you can rely on yourself when it matters. You become someone who knows what to do, but doesn't feel connected to the person who actually does it. That's the trade. You're not losing your life overnight. You're selling pieces of it in exchange for reduced friction in the moment. And because the payment is small each time, it doesn't feel expensive until you look back and realize how much you've paid. Most people think the problem is discipline. They think they need more willpower, more motivation, a better mindset, a tougher version of themselves. But it's not about discipline. It's about direction. Specifically, where friction exists in your life. If distraction is frictionless, you will drift into it. If progress is friction heavy, you will avoid it. That's not weakness. That's design. And the moment most people miss is this. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your defaults. The default isn't what you want. It's what your environment makes easiest. It's what your devices offer instantly. It's what your habits enable without thought. And that means the battle is often decided before you choose anything, because by the time you're deciding, you're already in motion. This is why advice like just focus rarely works. It treats distraction as a character flaw instead of a structural advantage. It assumes you're failing a test of strength when you're actually operating inside a system that keeps pulling you downhill. What actually matters is not whether you can force yourself to do hard things today. What matters is whether your life is built so that the right direction has fewer barriers than the wrong one. Not because you want it easy, because you want it reliable. The standard isn't, I'm going to be more productive. The standard is, I am becoming someone I can rely on. That's different. Because productivity is a mood-based goal. It fluctuates. It's vulnerable to energy, stress, and distractions. But reliability is a character-based standard. It doesn't require perfect days. It requires consistent alignment. Under this standard, you stop asking, what can I achieve today? And you start asking, what kind of person am I practicing being today? A reliable person doesn't need heroic motivation. They need continuity. They need a baseline they respect. They need a relationship with themselves. That's stable. And when you live by that standard, life feels different. Not because you're doing more, but because you're scattered less. You stop carrying the background guilt of unfinished intentions. You stop feeling like you're always catching up. Your mind becomes quieter because you're no longer constantly renegotiating your own promises. You trust your mornings more. You trust your decisions more. You trust your identity more. And that trust compounds. It turns effort into momentum. It turns planning into execution. It turns I should into I do. Not through a perfect plan. Through a higher standard that doesn't require inspiration. Just consistency. Real change here won't look intense. It will look quiet, almost unremarkable, because what you're correcting isn't a lack of effort, it's a lack of directional resistance. You've been living in a setup where distraction is effortless and progress requires you to fight your own momentum. So, what this requires of you is not a heroic surge of discipline. It requires a steady willingness to feel a little friction on purpose. And that friction will feel boring at first. It will feel like you're doing something small that doesn't count yet. It will feel like the first 10 minutes of focus are slow, awkward, and unimpressive. It will feel like your brain is pulling you toward the easier option and you're simply not following it. No adrenaline, no inspiration, just a quiet refusal to drift. You'll also feel resistance that doesn't sound like resistance. It will sound like logic. Now isn't the best time. Let me get one more thing out of the way. I'll do it when I can do it properly. I'm tired. I'll start fresh tomorrow. None of that sounds reckless. That's why it works. The internal voice that keeps you stuck rarely sounds destructive. It sounds reasonable. So what this requires is not intensity, but clarity. The ability to recognize when reasonable is actually just comfort trying to stay in control. And then you do the unglamorous thing anyway. A small example. You begin protecting your first point of contact with the day. Before you consume anything, before you scroll, check, or react, you create one deliberate action that points you forward. Not a full routine, not a complicated plan. One act that proves you decide the direction before the world does. It could be 10 minutes on the task you've been postponing. It could be one page, one paragraph, one rep, one call. Something that creates movement, because that's what rebuilds self-trust. Not big promises, but small proof. The cost is simple and steady. You will feel a little uncomfortable, a little understimulated, a little impatient, and you will do it anyway. Not to be hardcore, but to become reliable. If your life stays exactly as frictionless as it is right now, if the easiest options keep winning by default, who are you slowly becoming? Not in theory, not in motivation, in identity. Because the longer you live inside a system that constantly hands you the easy choice, the more you start to confuse ease with who you are. You begin to treat distraction as your personality. You start expecting yourself to drift. You stop being surprised when you don't follow through. And that's the quiet danger. It doesn't feel like you're losing anything because you're still functioning. You're still showing up. You're still surviving your days, but your standards adjust. You start building a version of yourself that needs things to feel effortless before you move. A version of yourself that waits for the perfect conditions. A version of yourself that keeps saying, I'm about to lock in, but never builds a life that makes locking in inevitable. And when you live like that for long enough, the most expensive loss isn't the goals you didn't hit. It's the relationship you have with your own word. Your promises start feeling like guesses. Your plans start feeling like hope. Your confidence becomes something you try to think into existence instead of something you earn through consistent behavior. That's why this question matters. It's not asking what you want. It's asking what you're practicing. Because every day, whether you admit it or not, you are rehearsing an identity. You're rehearsing, I follow through. Or you're rehearsing, I delay at E. You're rehearsing, I can be trusted. Or you're rehearsing, I need the mood. You're rehearsing, I do hard things. Or you're rehearsing, I escape friction. And the future version of you won't be built by your biggest intentions. They'll be built by what your life makes easy, what your environment rewards, and what you repeatedly allow without resistance. So here's the question that doesn't resolve cleanly and shouldn't. When nobody is watching and nothing forces you, do you live like someone you can rely on? Or like someone you keep having to negotiate with?